Okay, so welcome. Dr. Clark is our interview today, and I'm Dr. E, and happy to be leading the conversation. So welcome, Dr. Clark.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So we'll jump right in. I'll have some kind of get to know you questions, some that are maybe light and fun, and some that'll take us a little bit deeper.
Sure.
So the first question I have for you is, what do you think is one thing that the group watching this, the department, students, faculty might be surprised to learn about you?
Ooh, surprised to learn about me. Um, it's funny because I don't know why it didn't used to be surprising to like I didn't used to think it would be surprising, but as I get older, every time I tell people this, they're like, "What?" But I love to dance. Like I love to dance. And people like I'm not a small dude. I'm 6'3", I'm not like you notice when, a large person comes in the room. And so um a lot of people are surprised to hear that, but I grew up dancing a lot. One of my brothers was a performer, dancer, singer, artist, and
Mm.
my mother was very into music and very creative family. And so we would dance, like we would have like dance parties in my house
Wow,
and
fun.
very much normalized just like dancing together. And um, so when I go to like weddings or events or things, like I'm all
Mhm.
about, I've taken classes on different types of dance. And
Wow.
so, like I used to think I was a good dancer, but then there's this one time at a wedding, someone came up to me and was like, "You dance just like Justin Timberlake." And I was like, "Yes, that's awesome." And
That's
they're
a
like,
compliment.
"No, it's not a
Oh, no.
compliment." And I was
Oh,
like, "What?" I was like,
a good
"I take
dancer.
that as a compliment."
Yeah.
So they're like trying to insult me, and I'm like, "Nice try, but that's amazing." People
Uh-huh.
say that all the time.
Oh
So
my
uh,
gosh.
yeah, so I love to dance. That's a surprising thing to a lot of people.
That's a really neat thing to learn. And so maybe a follow-up question is, what song, if you were sitting at a wedding, what song would get you like, oh, sorry, I got to interrupt this conversation and get out on the dance
There's so much. I mean, it's interesting. When I listen to music, it's almost never about the lyrics. And that gets me in trouble sometimes because I'll be like, I love this song. And they're like, why? And I'm
floor?
like,
Mhm,
I don't even know what they're saying. I don't hear lyrics. I hear the beat and the
mhm,
music, the tempo, and all of that, the vibes, the energy. So I just listen to a lot of like um dance music and a lot of like Latin American
mhm,
reggaeton type hip hop
mhm,
music.
mhm.
So the lyrics are usually in Spanish, or I'm not even listening to them. David Guetta, anything by David Guetta, I like to listen to. Uh, I listen to Pitbull Radio all the time, so like Daddy Yankee, all these Bad Bunny like type music. I just like to move, so that's the kind of music that gets me on my feet.
Okay, so at our next residency, we're going to be
Oh yeah,
about the music and getting Dr. Clark to dance up front.
yeah, on the dance floor. Yeah, yeah.
That'll be so fun. Okay, very cool. That's a great start. What do you think others would say is your best characteristic
Um,
besides dancing, of course?
yeah. Besides my Justin
Besides
Timberlake
dancing,
moves,
yes.
um, my wife and partner, she's a very discerning person. She doesn't like people automatically, right? You have to kind of earn her a spot
Mhm,
in her heart and in her. And she's always confused by how I can just see the good, right, in anyone, and be kind regardless. And so I think one of my best attributes is to be personable and approachable to people, no,
mhm,
with a genuine nature. Like I have no judgment, right? Like for the most part, when I meet people, and I can be kind without really trying too hard, right? And that's,
mhm.
I have many faults. I almost feel weird saying that because I feel like I have to qualify with all the things I'm not good at. But kindness, you don't need to earn kindness from me. I think that is the how I would concisely state it.
Very nice. Yeah.
Hmm.
As someone who knows you and has interacted with you, I would absolutely agree with that
Thank you.
description. Yeah. All right. Well, maybe an interesting segue is, what is the first thing you notice in somebody else when you first meet them?
It's interesting. I don't see people when I first meet them. Like, cause like I would say, oh, I noticed what they're wearing or their handshake or their eyes or like whatever. I I'm really bad at like meeting someone and listening to what they say because they'll be like, "Hi, I'm Jeff," and I'm like, that doesn't process, right?
Mm,
I don't. And so and later I'm like, wait, what is that person's name? I don't even know. I just introduced myself. I don't listen. What I do is I feel their energy, right? And their presence, right?
mhm,
Um, Sounds kind of weird, but the thing I notice first is how I feel around them,
mhm,
right? Their energy and what they're giving off to me. If they're anxious, if they're
mm.
calm, if they're kind, if they're nice, if they're pleasant, polite, whatever the vibes, I guess.
Yeah.
So that's what I notice. It's kind of the energy they give off.
Mhm.
And I'm not someone that can like say, "Oh, you give off like purple energy" or like labels and stuff. It's more
Right.
just like how I feel around you. Uh,
Mhm.
and I think that's huge in the counseling field and counselor education, because we need to understand how we come across as uh, in the roles that we fill. So I'm very passionate about trying to help others understand that. Uh,
Mhm.
and so, but yeah, I notice how people come across and the energy they give me first.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Mhm.
And you're right, that is an important thing to build through a counselor development, and sometimes it can feel like a bit of an intangible.
Right.
It can be fostered,
Yeah.
knowing how important that is and how it can benefit us with our clients.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, moving along. Who would you say your mentor is, and what is the greatest piece of advice they have ever provided to you?
Hmm. Yeah, there's so many. I mean, it depends on what role, what, in what way, life mentor, counselor education mentor,
Mhm.
family mentor, developmentally. I mean, there's so many people who've shaped who I am. I am very much, I would say, shaped by very strong women in my life. My mom was a just Renaissance woman. She was
Mm.
at one point, she was a professional weightlifter.
Wow.
Then she also went to beauty school, as it was called at the time, and she was a hairdresser.
Mhm.
Then she was what she lovingly called a stoner, which is like she made artwork out of stone and masonry and things like that. Incredibly creative, um, very smart, and very outspoken, and made it known, right, how she felt and how to advocate for herself. And then my sister, one of my my multiple sisters, but one of my sisters, Terry, she really also molded me a lot in my like adolescent years and kind of um, helped me understand how to not be that guy that's like very gender conforming, sexist at times. Like
Mhm.
she uncovered a lot of things that I think a lot of teen boys in particular just don't kind of see. They need that kind of mentorship. And so she mentored me a lot and kind of understanding the world and understanding the importance of seeing the world. And I went on to live in many different countries in my 20s, kind of just seeing the world, partially because of people like my mom and my sister and others kind of giving me that guidance. And I'm the youngest of 6 kids. And so I had a big family growing up where I could kind of like be mentored a little bit by all of them. So even just saying Terry, like it's all my siblings in a lot of ways. And so, yeah, I kind of got to pick and choose what I wanted to kind of take from each of my siblings. And
Mhm.
being the youngest, I got to kind of see their mistakes and their kind of things that they went through, and kind of have that guide me. So I've had a lot of mentors.
That's wonderful. That sounds like you got a lot of modeling what to do, what not to do,
Yeah,
from all of your family members.
yeah.
Yeah, very nice. Given your many experiences living abroad, what has been one of the most pivotal experiences that you have had abroad, and how has that impacted you?
Mm. Well, for context, I lived starting out. I lived in London for a period of 6 months. That was more of a study abroad experience in undergrad when I was at UNC Chapel Hill, and then after I graduated, before I went and got my master's, I just wanted to kind of, I just needed to see the world and just go.
Mhm.
So I was the only male preschool teacher in the Kingdom of Bahrain. So I lived in the Middle East right after undergrad, just left, and helped open a preschool um, in Manama, which is the basically the capital and center of Bahrain, the small island next to Saudi Arabia. And my girlfriend at the time and I just moved. We went there, took a 2-year contract to just go live there. Then the pandemic, before the pandemic, the H1N1, the swine
Mhm.
flu pandemic hit
Mhm.
and closed down all schools
Mhm.
in a kingdom like that. So it's not like they're very scared about what would happen to the schools. So they shut down schools a month before I was going to start teaching.
Oh, wow.
And it was it was a really, really difficult time in a lot of ways. Figuring out what to do, and it was difficult for my girlfriend at the time living there because she was treated very differently than I was based on gender roles and things like
Mm.
that. And so um, I realized how oblivious I am to, or I was, sorry, to like different cultural factors that people that don't, that I've outside of me have to experience.
Mhm.
I'm from like rural Ohio. Like I just didn't, that didn't factor for me. I was a Midwestern kid growing up. There's just like, yeah, like, so high school things started to click. And then when I started traveling, I was like, wow, this is a big world out there and
Mhm.
outside of small town Ohio.
Yeah.
And, certain things that I just took for granted, I realized over there. And when swine flu shut down all schools, I moved to China. I lived there for 6 months in Bahrain, and then I helped open the school, but they never fully got off their feet because of the pandemic.
Mhm.
Went back to the drawing board, found a job as a behavior therapy consultant and working at an international school in Beijing.
Mm.
Um, Took a 2-year contract there with my partner, where we were both international school kind of employees, but I focused on, working on the IEP type stuff, working with kids
Mhm.
in schools. And I learned how much I thrive on adventure and getting to know a culture and learning languages. I had a 4-day a week intensive tutor in Mandarin, got to a point where I was mostly conversational in Chinese when I was there.
Mm.
Uh, and I learned how much of a learner I am, right? Of others and about others' cultures and about my own and how it interplays with that.
Mhm.
And yeah, China was amazing because it was like a way to completely have a rich cultural experience that was safe and stable.
Mm.
Where I didn't feel my partner and I didn't feel unsafe in any way. Yet we weren't sure how we were like going to the grocery store. Like, how are we going to get that done? How are we going to get places? How are we going to navigate like bills, living in an apartment in downtown Beijing? Like all these things.
Mhm.
And so I learned a lot about my own culture and other cultures living abroad and traveled all the time.
Yeah.
I think 40 different countries over those
Wow.
few years, like just going, Um, so yeah, I have lots of little stories about like, there's one time I was at a grocery store and there was this parent. They do what's called these split pants for like toddlers in China, where they're amazingly quick at being potty trained in Beijing because they don't a lot of kids don't wear diapers. So when they have
Mhm.
to go, they just go. And the parents, what they do is hold their kids up and take them and go to the bathroom. They don't
Mhm.
like wear like a diaper to go do so. So I remember seeing that like outside, like what is happening? These kids like holding their like babies up so they can go to the bathroom. I'm like, but then I thought about it, I'm like, that's brilliant. They don't wear diapers so that they
Mhm.
understand, oh, I have to go to a bathroom or go somewhere. I
Mhm.
feel the urge.
Mhm.
And so I had lots of moments like that where I'm like,
Wow.
what am I seeing right now? Like
Mhm.
this doesn't compute in my Midwestern brain. Um, and so, but when you peel back the layers, it's like, oh, that's brilliant. Like that is uh jarring at first to see, but then brilliant when you really peel
That
back
makes
the
sense.
onion.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. That's really neat. Well, and hearing, of course, culturally that exposure, but even just learning about yourself, learning that you're a learner,
exactly.
sounds so valuable.
Yeah, I tell people all the time, like if you can safely, with
Mhm.
study abroad or with any trip, just go. Like just go.
Mhm.
And now that I have two kids of my own, I'm always looking for ways I can travel with them, go abroad with them, go on trips and just see because you learn so much about you and your family and yourself in the process.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's wonderful. Sounds like great experiences that you had.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. When you have struggles or challenges, who do you go to for support?
I read something somewhere where it was like, even when you have support, don't like supportive people in your life, don't assume that they're available and ready in that moment to take what you want to give them, right?
Mm.
What you want to unleash or unload off your back. Um, because I was that guy for a long time for people, for friends and family who I was like, you have something, I'm really good at listening. Come to me. I'm always here for you.
Mhm.
And though I want to be there for everyone, I'm not always in the best place to take it, from them, right? To hear it, to absorb it, to be present with them. And so I've really internalized that over the years to really pick not only people who are supportive and I love dearly to be in my kind of inner circle and people that I can go to when I'm struggling, but I check to see like we all wear a lot of hats here, so what are you available? Can we talk?
Mhm.
If not, totally fine. I've normalized like saying, are you available for me to kind of just give you stuff tonight, right? And usually they say yes, but I also try to be really clear, like you don't have to say yes. Like another time, it's fine. But it was interesting. Some of my roommates over from college, I've reconnected with over the years, and we're in a similar place in life as parents and as just in life. And I just have certain people that have a really good blend of telling me it's going to be okay, giving me advice, and just listening. Right?
Mhm.
It's really hard to find people who don't want to go over advice you,
Yeah.
or just are like, and then they're like, "Are you even listening?" Like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Um, or people who make it about themselves. That's the worst. When you're like, "Can I give you something?" They're like, "Let me
Mhm.
tell you about my day." I'm like, "No,
Mhm.
that's not what I want."
Yeah.
Yeah. So I found people who have that blend of what you want. And then I check in with them and I offer my energy in that regard as well.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I mean, such a great point about like what is actually helpful when you do turn to someone for support,
Yeah.
how that support looks and
Hmm.
advice and one upping like, oh, my day was worse. Just so
Yeah.
not helpful. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's hard. I mean, we're all going through stuff, right? I mean, it's what a crazy time,
Mm.
at this point. And so I try to be mindful of that, when I'm having these moments with people. But I'm a very much an external kind of processor. When I'm going through something, I want to talk about it, and
Mm-hmm.
I've had to learn with my partner. She is not like, she's like nope, I'm not talking right now. That's the last thing I want to do when I'm in it. And I'm like, okay, I'm waiting. I'll be here when you're ready. So we have to be mindful of like people's styles as well.
Different styles. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Moving on then, what is the kindest act you have ever observed?
Oh man, that's a
It
good
can be
one.
from yourself, it can be from someone else.
Kindest act. Um, I mean, there's a lot out there. I mean, something that comes to mind is I'll try not to be like super emotional about it, but both my kids were NICU babies. And
Mm-hmm.
um one was in the NICU for 5 days, one was in NICU long term. And it's the kindest act when just what comes to my brain is the NICU nurses, and PICU nurses, like because it sounds ironic because that's their job to like do what they do.
Yeah.
But seeing it in action, they don't have to do the extent of what they do, right?
Mm.
Um, Going in with these kids who are just holding on to life, right? And then not just keeping them alive, but like nursing them, nourishing them emotionally as
Mm.
well as physically, right? There's something deeper there. That's not just doing your job. That
Yeah.
is doing it for the goodness of like humanity, right?
Yeah.
That's being, you know, uh, an angel at that, if you want to call it that. Like, so I just, yeah, that's what comes to my mind. I've never thought about that way other than
Yeah.
like, noticing it when I was there in it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but just some people are doing jobs that are already asking a lot. A lot of people are doing this, but going beyond that to like for such a selfless reason, other than just to like help save a life of
Mm-hmm.
a 2-pound infant,
Yeah.
like that's next level.
Yeah.
So that's what comes to mind.
Yeah. That's really profound when, we might think of an act of kindness as this like singular,
Hmm.
finite moment. But in your experience, seeing these NICU nurses, like, yeah, maybe their job, but this is so beyond, and they're doing it all the time.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
all
just,
the
wow.
time, day
Yeah.
in, out. Yeah, yeah, and because I don't know, and especially over the pandemic, I try to
Mhm.
notice like the good, because there's a lot of like, man, the world is in a tough spot, and so um, I just think it's important to see people and when they are being kind, and there's nothing that comes to mind more than that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a wonderful example.
Mm.
Okay. Where do you see the greatest need for advocacy in our field of counseling and counselor education?
Mm, there's a lot. Um, there's a lot of need for advocacy, and when I was in undergrad and my master's program, I often thought like, what does advocacy look like? Like, what
Mm.
do I do? I can read about it. I can read books. I can read articles. I can participate in discussions in class and in forums. But like, what does it look like to do it?
Mhm.
And um, this is certainly maybe a bias of mine or leaning of mine, but I'm a child and adolescent counselor at, from a clinical level, and um, there's schools are really struggling. Um, I'm thinking about like K-12 type of environments, and so I think advocating for kids and teachers and people who work in schools is really important. Advocate, like I'm in North Carolina, where pay is abysmal for teachers, kids, and the ratios of school counselors to children is ridiculous, like 500, 700 to 1, right? The class sizes are getting huge, so kids are kind of getting lost in the shuffle. Bullying, cyberbullying, teasing, just lack of basic needs being met. I mean, it's schools are being asked to just do so much now. And the pandemic really uncovered a lot of big holes we have with schools and education, especially early childhood education. So I see a huge need in overhauling how we do education, and valuing more people who make education work. And so that is something I participate in terms of legislation and volunteering and whatever I can do to be an active participant in changing the education system to benefit more of the people who are in it and students. Because just not working. It hasn't been working for a long time, and it's not equitable. It's a toxic environment in a lot of ways. Not at the fault of teachers, but at the fault of systemic issues. And we have to really look at that, take a hard look at that. It's a system that education system, particularly elementary and K-12, it was formed so long ago. And we just haven't really, in my opinion, asked the questions like, do we have to do all this? Like, can we completely shift this system? I don't think we're asking the hard questions. So yeah, that's definitely an area I think needs more advocacy among obviously a million other things, right? But that's something that I see. I have 2 young kids. It's just a big part of my life. So yeah.
And as you're talking about it, I'm thinking of the ripple effect that when there's so many systems that need advocacy and support us in the education system, if we can make a change there, that can impact child development and family systems and community connections and access to resources. And certainly you make a wonderful case for how important it is to advocate.
Yeah, we live in an area where our public school is fairly, I mean, it's fine, but there's very little diversity, and very majority white American children that are just, it's fun. So we decided to go to a magnet, put our children in magnet, that has very specific diversity standards, and it's really growing, but there's just so much lack of resources that are available to put into it because it's in North Carolina, and it's there's all these just larger big picture issues that are like, man, we just struggle, with like day to day, how do we make systemic change on an individual level? It gets discouraging at times. But yeah, I just, I hope we can continue to move towards like thinking big picture and making big changes.
Yeah. Well said.
Yeah.
Okay, going a little bit lighter. There's this question that if you had to delete all but 3 apps on your phone, what would be the 3 apps that you would have to keep?
Oh my gosh. So I focus a lot on tech dependence and tech issues with kids and teens. A lot of like stuff on that. I think tech is at the root of a lot of like concerns with kids, right? Video games, phone use, at all of it. That being said, tech's not the bad guy, but it's their societies and like, hey, you should get a phone even though you're 8, right? Like, hey, you should get on social, like get Snapchat, sure, an app designed to hide things from your parents, right? So I have a lot of social media on my phone that I do to connect with people about the issues with social media. It's just
Uh-huh.
like I have a TikTok channel. I'm like, hey, get off TikTok. Basically the message is like, be wary of these apps that I'm on the app telling you about, right?
Mhm.
Um, so my answer first of all is those would go. Like if it were up to me, it would go back to the AOL Instant Messenger days, and if that, right, or that's like all you could do.
Yeah.
Phone is a phone, but I know it's 2023. We're not doing that. But um, so would not have social media. It would be fairly basic. Music app, I have like I just like I've talked about before with my dance moves, like
Yeah.
music's
Gotta have
very
that.
important to me.
Yeah.
I gotta have that. Email would go. I don't like I have to, but like in a theoretical world, like no, let's not do that on my phone. Um, 3 apps. I mean, I do the camera would be there because
Mhm.
I have so many pictures that come up and I'm like, oh, that I needed that, like especially like my kids or traveling, like so the camera app would be there,
Mhm.
music app. I mean, I don't know, like the third one. So fun fact, I'm like really into European soccer. And so like I have to keep up to date with like my sports, I have certain teams that I'm really into, and then for better or for worse, that's like a big interest of mine. So yeah, I would have my whatever's one of my sports apps I would have to keep up to date. That's a big part of my like self-care. I'm going to like one of my favorite European soccer teams. I'm going to see them this year, and um, I just have certain teams I'm a big fan of, and so yeah, like that's one of the things about like one of my interests that keeps me sane. So I would probably have that.
Mhm. Sounds like the apps that you would keep are very much for like self-care, enjoyment of
Yeah,
life, of the different interests that you have.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're not completely dissociative either. Like a lot of the phone use can be just total dissociation. There's like mindless, scrolling,
Yeah.
right? And I don't want to do that. Although I do that. I mean, don't get me wrong, I think everyone who has a phone these days does it to a certain extent.
Sure.
I try to be more mindful. And so music and taking pictures to remember moments, that makes sense to me.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
but yeah,
Yeah. Very nice. Okay, we're on our last question.
boy.
So this one is, what was one of the biggest challenges that you've ever had to overcome? And what was that experience like for you?
Yeah, I mean, so I have to talk about high school. I think that's really the foundation. So just to be upfront, when I was in high school, I had a really hard time, and it really set the foundation for me being in the helping professions. So I had a fairly like typical Midwestern Ohio kind of childhood, big family, 6 kids, and mom and dad married, lived together, had a pretty fortunate life
Mhm.
in terms of stability and predictability and structure,
Mhm.
um, until I was 16. And then my mom was diagnosed with cancer.
Mhm.
Um, then while she was going through treatment, out of nowhere, my dad fell asleep at work and died, have a heart attack.
Oh my gosh.
So when we got the call about that, we're like, oh, I thought it was
Yeah. We're
um
protective and
yeah.
yeah.
And I
Yeah.
was like, I remember being in high school, literally, my mom was not doing so well so long that when a note would be sent to my classroom, my heart would like
Mhm.
sink because
Yeah.
I had to go to school thinking like, is she even gonna make it
Yeah.
so long? So then
Yeah.
when I got the news in that phase that my dad had passed, um, how do you
Yeah.
process that? And so I I left school. I took almost a year off and stayed home. All my siblings were out of school or out of in college or beyond. So I was the only one still left.
Mhm.
And I was like her caretaker with her friend. And, so I wanted to do that. I wanted to be the like at home nurse kind of for my mom.
Mhm.
Um, but looking back on it, like the work that I had to do to heal showed me, although I wanted to, I shouldn't have.
Mm.
Because that's too much for a 16-year-old boy, to do.
Mhm.
And I had to deal with that in a big way, right? In my 20s, and getting like the trauma that caused
Yeah.
has lasted for a long time. And still to this day is part of me, even after through healing. Um, but I took care of her for about 6 months, and then she passed away. And so by the time I was 17 or 16 and a half or so, um, I was an emancipated minor. So I had living, on Social Security, buying my own thing. It was my own grocery. Like I had to learn how to like live independently, but with my older brother. He was like 24 at the time.
Mhm.
Um, and so surviving there for a while. And I learned like I was doing well, right? Like I had a 4.0 in high school. I had a 4.0 in college. I was involved in all these things, activities, and like on paper, I
Yeah.
was, wow, you're so like you're doing really well. How do you do it? And I kind of fed into that, like, yeah, I am doing well. I'm not going to be that guy that goes through all this and is, whatever, like having a
Mhm.
hard hitting rock bottom.
Mhm.
And I realized that I was just surviving, right? And I was using education as a way to like try to prove that I was fine.
Mhm.
I so was not, right?
Mhm.
Um, and recently, this reminds me, there's a guy I followed, a dancer. It was Ellen's DJ. His name's
Yeah.
Twitch. Um,
Yeah.
he died by suicide recently, and I
Mhm.
remember thinking, like, everyone was like, "How could he have, done that? How could he die by suicide? He was the happiest dancing like guy on social media, and he was had a beautiful family,
Mhm.
And I remember thinking, like, doing well is we don't know,
Never know.
And when I was in high school, I was not doing well, right?
Mhm.
My parents had just passed, and my mom was my best friend. Like, it wasn't like a distant relative; it was my parents, And um, so I wasn't doing well, and I wasn't really challenged to look at that and say, like,
Mhm.
because it's hard. It's hard to push this on someone, poke, and be like, "Are you really okay?"
Yeah.
Because my siblings were all surviving too. It's not like they could step in and be like, "No, you need to go to counseling." I just so that's when I really learned about like my healing journey, and I did a lot of work in various ways, um, and it manifested itself in my 20s. It was like 23, 24 after I started traveling and hitting
Mhm.
a lot of hurdles and a lot of personal struggle in my 20s, where I realized, like, oh, yeah, it's been 8, 10, 12 years since the traumatic events of
Mhm.
my high school years.
Mhm.
But trauma doesn't care about time, doesn't care about the timeline of when it happened. It was still in me, and I was still maladaptively coping. I was still very much relying on many things to just like pretend like I was fine, and I wasn't. And I think that's the case for a lot of people.
Mhm.
As long as I'm doing this, I'm fine. They trick themselves into thinking they're fine. They trick others into thinking they're fine when they're not. And so, it really led me down the path of like, first of all, teaching and with preschool and working with early childhood.
Mhm.
I really can connect with that. Like, because I wish I had a little bit more of like a connection to that when I was younger. And so I did my own healing journey, then went into this field and felt like I could contribute in a way
Mhm.
because of my experience, but not in a risky way, like countertransference wise, but with a way of like understanding, and respecting mental
Mhm.
health, respecting the trauma process,
Yeah.
respecting the healing journey,
Mhm.
right? And so um I survived quite a bit of like world upending
Yeah,
trauma.
definitely.
And then kind of I'm a very much an introspective inward thinker, and so long journey to kind of heal, and it's still going, but like um it kind of molded me to be who I am.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm so grateful that you were willing to share all of that and, really model the reality that it's okay to not be okay. And, understanding those pressures to be fine are, so unhelpful. And and that we all go through our own challenges however they look, and that to just get through that moment is not really how it goes,
Right.
um, with us, and therefore the healing process needs to be with us too.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I it's a lot kind of to share, but it's like we go through a lot, as human beings, especially in the last few years. And
Mhm.
I want to model like you have to be honest with yourself and say, like, am I pretending like I'm fine right now? Because I don't have to
Yeah.
pretend I'm fine.
Mhm.
Um, because I wish I would have done that a little sooner. And
Mm.
now I'm able to kind of be in a good place where I can kind of talk about that and be honest with people, because I think people need to hear it.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree, absolutely.
Mhm.
Well, Dr. Clark, you've gone through our 10 big questions.
Yeah.
Do you have any I guess here's 11, any final, tidbits that you wanna offer anyone who's watching this video?
Um, well, I mean, I appreciate anyone taking the time to kind of get to know me and kind of watch this. Yeah, and I think it's important to really like lean into this and being vulnerable and being open, being genuine with people. And so I'm grateful for the opportunity to do it.
Yeah, well, wonderful. Well, it was even though you and I work together frequently, I also feel privileged to get to know you a little bit more, so
Thank
thank you
you.
for doing this with me.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, well, we will sign off here. Thanks everyone for watching.
Thank you.